Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Into the Stands. He's Chris, he's Robbie, I'm Colin. Today, we're going to get into the latest news in sports throughout the past week. Now, obviously, the biggest story of this past week has been the World Series. The Philadelphia Phillies and the Houston Astros in a battle for the World Series championship. So, the series started off with Philly taking a game in Houston, a game where when it went into extra innings, Philly stormed back from a 5-0 deficit, something which they weren't able to do in Game 2. The Astros ended up even in the series. Game 3 saw Lance McCullers get hit for 5 home runs. A very dominant performance by that Phillies offense. You know, Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Brandon Marsh, all those guys getting in on the action. And then in Game 4, we saw Christian Javier toss a no-hitter, the second no-hitter in World Series history behind Don Larson in 1956. So let's talk a little bit more about this World Series.
Look, it's been a really cool series. I mean, obviously 2-2. Someone is going to be going back to Houston with a 3-2 lead, with the chance. Look, I feel like at this point, even though I think I said Astros in 6, I'd love this thing to go to 7. I think that'd be really cool. Really, I think there hasn't been much like. Obviously, yesterday the no hitter was incredible, insane. I saw myself, even though I'm rooting for the Phillies, kind of a diehard Phillies fan right now. I was actually rooting for the Astros to get to the no hitter at the end there, because I thought, obviously, seeing history, it was 5-0, 2 outs. There's no point in rooting for the Phillies to come back. It's as good as they've been. They're not gonna come back unless they walk 3 times, get a grand slam, and then I'd be rooting for them again. But I might as well see the no hitter, see some history, and we did. But apart from that, and Game 1's comeback, I mean, Games 2 and 3 were pretty decisive victories for both sides. Astros 5-0 win on in Game 2. Went to Philly, where the crowd is electric, and the Phillies dominated Lance McCullers. I mean, he has not been very good at all for the. I think he had a good start against the Mariners in that 18-inning game, but he hasn't been. He was not very good against the Yankees. I mean, he made their offense look competitive, and so that was bad enough. And then giving up 5 home runs against the Phillies, it was just insane. And man, I really like. Yeah, I was rooting for the Nationals in 2019. Yeah, and I'm diehard rooting for the Braves last year as well. But I love this Phillies team. They are so much fun. I think we were watching Colin Coward yesterday, and he was saying how this team is like a college baseball team, just having fun. Bryce just having fun. Bryce Harper, a guy whose entire career criticized for having fun, for having the long hair, the beard, the flair, the energy, all that, and it's like, and he also brought up another good point. It's like, well, I don't understand why baseball has to be like so corporate. Like, you cannot be your own
I think they
yourself.
said too vanilla, I think is what Colin
Is that what he
suggests.
said?
I think that's what it was, for being too bland and boring and
Yeah,
like
I
not having
mean,
any
it's
energy.
very
So.
corporate. Everyone's got to follow the same personality, and no one can be themselves. No one can express themselves.
Well, I actually
the way
want
they
to
want
ask,
to.
could you argue the Yankees could be one of the biggest, factors of that, considering their
I don't think
tradition?
like they don't stop you. All right, because like, yeah, obviously the whole beard thing, and then the whole all that. But I don't. I feel like if anything, this Yankees team with run by I mean, I feel like with this I feel like they've had a different clubhouse mentality where it seems like when they make excuses, obviously, like I said last week, they're defended by that. So I think if anything, that's kind of gone away. This idea of, because I think you see guys like Labor Torres and even Josh Donaldson at times like expressing themselves, and they don't really get punished a whole lot. I mean, obviously Donaldson did some pretty stupid things and got punished for that, as he should have. But no, I think I think the Yankees with that whole beard thing, I think that's a problem. But I think it's for a different reason. I don't think it's for trying to stop them from being having that personality. I know Clint Frazier was a guy who didn't really like it here, didn't feel free. So that's something you could debate. But I feel like the Yankees truly, I think they have some guys who do express themselves. But I think when it comes to the Yankees, that you've seen free agents like Tatis and I'm sorry, not Tatis, Machado and Harper, where I feel that, yeah, they've kind of passed up on those guys because of that. So I don't think they actively do it against their players, but I think it's something that they try to keep at the back of their minds, and it has not worked for them at all, because they passed up on some pretty good talents because of that. And I think they got to get rid of the beard thing. But no, I think when it comes to the Phillies, they're just having fun, man. And another thing with them, if they lose this series, they're not going to make excuses. They're not going to sit back and say, oh, it's fine. We made the World Series. We weren't expected to be here. No. And if you look at this roster, they're very shallow. It's the type of roster that I think, as fans, I think we have to, going forward, have to like rethink how we view teams going into the postseason. Because, yeah, I don't think anyone expected this team to do it. And Joe Davis mentioned this on the broadcast a few weeks ago when they were about to win Game 5 of the NLCS. This team is the type of team, if you look at them, all they needed to do is get in. And they have what it takes. They have the hitters. Even though maybe your top 3 guys are the only ones you look at, right? Like Harper, Real Muto, and Schwarber, right? Those are maybe the top 3 guys you pay
Hoskins
attention
as well.
to. Hoskins as well. But apart from those guys, really, I mean, you look at the rest of the lineup, it doesn't really scare you. But they got it done. They've been getting it done, man. Those guys get on base, and these top 3 hitters, they're the top 3. Maybe they're not 1, 2, 3 in the lineup. Like Harper's usually 4, right? Like Schwarber leads off, right? But those big 3 hitters, right? Real Muto, which, I mean, Real Muto is the catcher, but he's been a really good hitter. Harper and Schwarber, they get the big hits when necessary, and they drive in those guys who get on base. The pitching, they have the 1-2 punch, and Ranger Suarez has come into the fold. Like, he's been insane. He's been their most consistent pitcher there, it seems like. Him and Wheeler. I mean, I don't think Rangers has had a bad start yet. And now Syndergaard's pitching today, and they've found a way to win after you pass the 3 starter, right? They won with Syndergaard against the Braves. They won with I think it was Bailey Falter, who pitched terribly, but that was that crazy offensive performance in Game 4 against the Padres. They're just finding ways to win. So they have the hitting, the power, guys that get on base, the 1-2-3 punch in the starting rotation, 1 or 2 bullpen arms that can close out games, and then that right little pinch of postseason magic to go along with it. And it's created the perfect recipe of a postseason team. And man, I think everyone's just rooting for them right now. And
yeah, I feel like when you look at the Phillies roster, you say how not deep they are. Like, look at the names you have in their infield. I mean, you add Gene Segura, who's been phenomenal defensively. You add Alec Bohm, who was underachieving, underperforming in the beginning of the year, started to emerge back more in the second half, and really has looked good in the postseason. And then you look at the rest of the roster. You mentioned the bullpen. David Robertson's been reemerged.
He's actually, he's been pretty shaky. Like
he's looked shaky, but like in the World Series, he's looked shaky. Yeah, but in previous rounds, oh god, he looked good. He looked good, man. He looked good. Alvarado's been locked down.
You see,
Zach Eflin being a starter and having Syndergaard, I believe, pitched out of the bullpen in one of the and I believe in the. I don't remember what game it was, but he pitched in a playoff game out of the bullpen. He pitched an inning 2/3 and looked decent. So the Phillies are really managing their way to, yeah, we have starting pitching depth. They're very good. Our bullpen is not that good. We have now weapons in the rotation. It's the playoffs. You can use starters out of the bullpen in the playoffs. No one cares. There's no written rules on who you can pitch in a game. Like, I'm going to go back a few weeks ago when we talked about that 18-inning game with the Mariners. I think they used all bullpen arms till the last inning of that game. So you have to. I thought that actually they should have gone to a starter earlier because, well, 1, maybe the game would have ended, but 2, you would have wasted less bullpen arms if you got further in that playoff round. But besides the point, I love what the Phillies are doing. You mentioned they have that pinch of playoff magic, but to go back to the series, seeing Lance McCullers tip pitches, you feel like it's karma for that trash can thing a few years ago. If they continue to do it, maybe you can kind of connect it to that. But but it's too early to really like hint at something like that. But I mean, because they did it for a longer time, that's really the difference between the two of them. But you go back to like Game 1. I remember watching Game 1 in my friend's dorm, and you rewatch that game. I'm like, wow, the Phillies have that extra fight that not many teams do. They just have that piece of energy in them, man. And you see what they're able to do. JC Realmuto's home run, I think it was like second pitch of the at bat, opposite field, waits. Yeah, that's what you textbook hitting. Opposite field slider. There you go. 6-5. Close it the door with Robertson. That's the only game he's looked good in the entire playoffs. But unfortunately, I feel like the World Series could have ended if they didn't get rained out a couple of days ago. I believe it was that Halloween or something around that time?
Halloween. In Philadelphia. Halloween. It rained over there.
That would have been a
And,
fun game. Halloween baseball. That would have been a lot of
yeah.
fun for Philadelphia. But
no, it wasn't a lot of fun for the Mets a few years ago.
well, no, it wasn't, and
That
we
was Steven
don't need
Matz.
to really go into that. But at the end of the day, Phillies, I still feel like they can get it done. I'm excited to see how this series ends. I'm still sticking to my pick from last week, or I think it was last week when I said Phillies in 6. I'm still sticking with that. So, I mean, you guys got anything else to add about this?
I mean, yeah, just this roster, man. You know, the common phrase is you need depth to get to the playoffs, but you need that star power to get through the playoffs. Whether that's the top 2 in a rotation, the top 3 in a lineup, the bullpen 1 or 2 relievers, right? All they needed to do is sneak in, and they did, right? And I remember a few years ago, actually, I can't believe I'm saying this, but actually going on a rant about the Phillies and how they're developed, because they were, constantly a team that misses out in the playoffs. And you look at the roster, it's like you signed Harper. I mean, they make all the obvious moves. They're kind of like the anti-Yankees, it seems like. It really does. And I think I'm not going to look. I know there's going to be a lot of time to rant about the Yankees in the offseason and what they should do. And we'll get into that probably next week. But, I think there could be a lot that the Yankees learn. You see what they did with the shortstops, the Phillies, right? Didi Gregorius starting shortstop. They had Bryson Stott, young stud. They saw Didi wasn't really effective anymore, and this kid is going to provide some spark. They released Didi. We love you, Didi, but we have this young kid who we want to be our starting shortstop, and we believe in him. Second baseman Segura, contact hitter, right? They have this
He's been quick contact hitter, great defensively. But I want to go back to the shortstops real quick. You mentioned a young shortstop on the Phillies. I quickly want to mention Jeremy Pena.
He's another one with the Astros situation.
Look what he's done. The replacement for Correa. He's looked great.
I mean, there was that article. I read an article. I don't know if it was one from The Athletic or I don't know because I read 2 articles that kind of related to the Yankees. The Astros and Phillies are World Series matchups from the 2 World Series shortstops are showing the Yankees exactly what they should have done.
Aren't they also both under 23?
I believe so.
I know Stott's 21. I don't know how old Pena is. But the replacement for Carlos Correa. And when we get to go in the next week by preview, free agency preview, that's next week. But when we get to go into that, I can't wait to see what everyone does. But I mean, back to you on what you've been saying.
Yeah, I mean, another thing, this team, like I said, if they lose, the Astros and the Phillies, whoever loses, they're not going to make excuses. They're not going to sit there and say, "Oh, we made it, it's fine." Kind of like how the Yankees are doing. Look, I'm embarrassed to be a Yankee fan right now, not just because they lost, but because they're making excuses about it, and they're content with it. And they go back to previous years. Oh, we lost in 2017 because they cheated. That's why we lost, because they cheated. We would have been in the World Series if they didn't cheat. Not because we scored 3 runs in 4 games in Houston, because they cheated. 2018, the Red Sox were better than us. We won 100 games. So it was okay. 2019, no, they used buzzers, right? So constantly making excuses. The Phillies, you heard John Middleton, I think is his name, the owner. He's been saying how he wants his championship. This roster's not a real championship roster, but they snuck in. And they're here now. And if they lose, they're not gonna make excuses. They want to win with this. They're gonna look back at this and they're gonna say this is our chance, because we don't know if we're gonna make it next year. And they're not gonna make excuses. They want to win this World Series, and they're not gonna be content with not winning it. You saw Kyle Schwarber after yesterday's loss wrote it off right away. We got to win tomorrow. I don't care that it was a World Series, second World Series no hitter. You got to come back tomorrow and win. These guys don't care.
And let's get into the probable starters coming forward in this World Series. So tonight, Game 5, we're going to see Justin Verlander versus Noah Syndergaard. This is a matchup that, on paper, before this postseason started, you would think that the Astros 100% have the advantage. But Justin Verlander has been pitching to a 7.20 ERA in this postseason, and Noah Syndergaard has pitched to a 1.69, as surprising as that is. But possibly we might be looking at Justin Verlander's final start as a Houston Astro tonight, as he's going to hit free agency in the offseason. But regardless, we're still going to get Game 6, regardless of the outcome here. And it's looking like we're going to get Zach Wheeler versus Framber Valdez going back to Houston. Game 7, I'm not sure who they throw out there to pitch. Maybe you're looking at Nola for Philadelphia.
Yeah,
I mean,
Nola, it would be Nola and probably who did they pitch?
I would go with the guy who pitched yesterday, Javier. I would not go to McCullers. I'd not go.
He would not be on enough rest for how many pitches he threw. So I don't know how else they'd use.
Game 7 would be Sunday. Yesterday
it would be. When was
4 days rest? You got it.
4 days?
You got it. I think if you got thrown 4 innings and go to your bullpen,
I think you go opener and then go to him. I feel like you can get more use out of him if they go with the opener.
Or he could be the opener. Everyone comes into the table. Everyone comes into the equation in Game 7.
But I guess before we finish off talking about this World Series, because by the time we come on our next show, we're actually going to have our World Series champion, whether that is the Houston Astros or the Philadelphia Phillies. I think it's only appropriate that we once again kind of give our prediction, see if we stick with them. I said Phillies in 6. Now, granted, it's going to be tough tonight against this Houston Astros team with Justin Verlander. I expect Justin Verlander to have a bounce-back pitching performance. I just can't imagine that a future Hall of Fame pitcher like him is going to have this rough of a postseason. So I think Justin Verlander has a big performance. But I think the Phillies pull out a late win and they'll win Game 6. I'll stick to my prediction. I'm not sure how confident I am in it, considering how that offense did get shut down by Christian Javier. But we'll see what happens by the time we get to our next show, guys.
I want to say Astros in 6, but after looking at what Verlander did, and he didn't look bad. I mean, until he got to like the 5th inning or the 4th inning, he actually started out pretty well. He's going to make adjustments. He's a veteran pitcher. I don't know. Today's a tough one, but today's going to really be.
Today decides, I think.
I think someone wins in 6.
Yeah,
I think
someone has to.
Whoever wins today is going to win in Houston as well. I'm going to have to stick with Houston, though. Don't want to do it. Don't want to say it. Don't like them. Oh, I respect them, but don't want to say it. But I think they're going to win.
Noah Syndergaard has not been known for pitching well in the playoffs with the Mets. I mean, he had like a 4 ERA or something.
I think
so
I feel
he's been pretty good. I mean, I don't know. He had to start against the Royals.
I
think
the one against the Giants.
He got
16.
I think he got tanked against somebody else. I think like the Cubs gave him like
maybe.
I don't know, but
I'm
gonna go with
I'm
sticking with my pick with the Phillies in 6. But we're gonna transition from the World Series to all the mayhem that happened over the last few days with the NFL. We're gonna kick it off with the New York Jets, who found a way to lose. And to quickly go into the Jets game, they lost 22-17, a game that a lot of people thought the Jets should have won. And when you look back at this game, you can point fingers at Zach Wilson making dumb mistakes, which he did do, or people not making tackles or stupid penalties. There's a lot of things you can look at, but the play that changed this game was the roughing the passer on John Franklin Myers in the second quarter that would have resulted in a pick 6 for Michael Carter II, his second pick of the game, if that was to stand. So, and now a lot of people are saying, "Oh, the Jets suck. They lost to the Patriots." This is what the Jets. I think the Jets needed this loss at the end of the day, because people are like, "Oh, the Jets are going to the playoffs." Are they really? Like you can make an argument that every team in the AFC East has an equal chance making the playoffs. You can fairly argue that. Like, you see what the teams at the trade deadline did. We're going to go into that in a second. But, I mean, the Jets, they trade by Jacob Martin. He was just depth. He was pretty good. They lose Breece Hall, which I think is the worst thing that could have happened to them. I'm going to be honest. There's a million players in the team I would have rather lost other than Breece Hall. And the other one player, like the 2 players I would not have wanted to lose was Sauce Gardner and Zach Wilson. Those are the 2 players I did not want to lose other than Breece Hall. So when you look at back how valuable Breece Hall was to this team, if they get James Robinson, who has potential, who knows? We talked about him last week and how long he stays here. Who knows? But this is like a coming down back to earth moment for the Jets. I think something they needed, because you can't really have expectations with this team. And that's an issue I've always had. It's like the Jets, they have expectations. They're really good. They're a very streaky side. That's not what you really want as a fan. They go into an interesting game with the Bills. I get to talk about that in a couple of minutes. But when at the end of the day, you can't be. I'm frustrated as a fan of this team, but this had to happen eventually. It sucks that had to happen against New England. It was inevitable. But at the end of the day, it was something this team needed to bring them back down to earth, back to reality, and say, yeah, we're gonna fight all the way down to the very end. But there's adjustments that need to be made. But at the end of the day, Jets go to 5-3. They get to play Buffalo next week, which that's going to be fun for whoever wants to win that football game. But Colin, the Giants, tough loss over the weekend to Geno Smith, a former New York Giant.
Yeah, both the Giants and Jets 4-game winning streaks both got snapped. There was a month straight where the Giants and Jets did not lose a game. It was pretty good to be a New York sports football fan, but I guess you can kind of came back to reality, at least to some degree. And all I can really say about that Giants loss to the Seahawks, the game that they ended up losing 13-27, is that, I mean, I guess it was just bound to happen. So many times this Giants team won those one possession games. once again, they were down going into that fourth quarter. I think a lot of Giants fans kind of felt, all right, maybe this is the time where finally the offense starts to take off. Maybe we start to make big plays. But the problem is you can't always rely on that. You can't always expect a team, especially a team like the Giants, a team which is kind of devoid of talent, really relies on coaching and playing great situational football. It's not always going to work out exactly how you expect it to. And I mean, Geno Smith, Robbie kind of alluded to him right there, had once again a very good game. 2 touchdowns, about 230 passing yards. After beating the Giants, he actually shouted out Ben McAdoo and Jerry Reese for believing in him, which, looking back on that whole entire situation, I'll get into that right here quickly. Eli Manning getting benched in 2017 following a rough start to the season for Geno Smith. Ultimately, it may have been the right move, actually. Ben McAdoo may have had the right idea after all. I mean, who would have thought that? But just the optics around that whole entire situation, benching Eli Manning, the guy who was the franchise quarterback for all those years. I mean, it kind of sounds funny that we're still bringing this up 5 years later, but I guess it's still relevant because Geno Smith, man, I mean, just phenomenal really starts that season. And the Seahawks in general, I mean, they're such a surprise, 5-3, really could be competing for a playoff spot by the time we finish the season. I mean, right now they're leading the NFC West. I think that possibly, San Francisco could overtake them as the season progresses, but really just hats off to them. I mean, they're a very good football team. Do not get me wrong on that. But going back to the Giants, the things that people are going to point out right away is the Richie James 2 fumbles on the punt returns. And one of them was on a punt return. One of them was on a kickoff return. Richie James should not have been returning the ball in that second time. We saw Gary Brightwell return a kick. He did a pretty solid job. But yeah, I don't imagine Richie James is going to be getting those carries going forward. Actually, on that second fumble, he actually had a concussion, which I do think was the reason as to why he fumbled. But once again, the Giants wide receiving group, it's not impressive by any means. I mean, Darius Slayton once again led the way. I believe he had about 60 receiving yards. But the kind of expectation was that the Giants were going to make a move for wide receiver at the deadline. They were getting attached to names like Brandon Cooks, Jerry Jeudy. But ultimately, general manager Joe Schoen did not pull the trigger. The kind of the thought process here is that, you're still in the rebuild and that you've kind of outperformed all of your expectations, and that the thought process is, I guess we'll just see what happens to the group we have now and we'll go from there. I mean, as a fan, you do get disappointed to a degree. You will like to see those moves get made. You kind of want to see those big acquisitions. But ultimately, still, if you're a Giants fan, you heard at this point in the season that you were going to be 6-2, I think every single person in the fan base would sign up for that. Not even the most delusional Giants fan could have predicted that this is how the season would start. And I mean, so far halfway through, I have nothing but good things to say. That's kind of a loss that I've seen from the Giants in the past, but once again, it's expected. But another big story out of Giants land is that Joe Schoen said that although he did not know that wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. was in the building when he came for the visit, he's still open to the possibility of bringing them back to the team. And man, as a fan, I would love to see that because we haven't really talked about Odell's market a lot, but I really do think he's the perfect fit for that Giants team. I think that the Giants are looking for that big play wide receiver. They don't have that. Kenny Golladay is kind of more of a contested catch guy. Odell's the guy who can burn defense and get for a long score. I think that's exactly what this Giants team needs. Obviously, he has the familiarity. He has all the relationships with those teammates. So I'm going to switch it over to you now, Chris. What do you say about both the Giants loss and the possibility of Odell Beckham in the future coming back?
I mean, I don't know if I'm missing something. I don't know why they haven't signed Odell already. Like, is there a reason?
Because he's currently still rehabbing from the ACL, so he won't be back until December. So we could see the possibility he comes back in December.
Might as well. I mean, it'd be more fun. I mean, if you're in the rebuild, I mean, you're just like, it's not, I know you don't want to mess around or anything because even though you are in a rebuild, you are having a really good season. You don't want to take that lightly, but just bring him back, man. He was fun to watch. He was really good. It's not like you have much better, really.
Do they have the cap space to do this?
That's another thing I was thinking.
That's a good point with the minimum.
Just a rough game.
Would he take the minimum? Would he take the minimum though?
I mean, the way I see it is that I think that Odell always loved playing in the New York spotlight. I think that in Cleveland, he was unhappy not only because he wasn't getting the ball from Baker Mayfield, but I mean, Cleveland's kind of a smaller market. We really saw him kind of have a resurgence in both his play and kind of his attitude once he came back to Los Angeles with the Rams. I think that the Giants fan base, at least most of them, love him, and I think that Odell loves the Giants. So I think that's a move that should happen. Obviously, a lot of teams get thrown out there, like the Packers, and maybe, he goes to another one of those contending teams. But I mean, the Giants are a contending team right now, right? They're 6-2. Odell wants to play for a contender, and I think what better than his old New York Giants?
Yeah, I mean, Danny, just not the best, but Geno really good game from him. Just not much to go over, right? Not much to use. And Danny doesn't have many weapons, really. I think really only Saquon, and
I think that makes
Dino's got a lot.
that what makes their record so much more significant.
Yeah, and I mean,
Maybe they go out and draft a receiver with the
You're-
picks they got, which we get to talk about that trade in a couple minutes. Like maybe they draft a receiver. Please find a way to draft a good receiver. Didn't they just draft Wan'Dale Robinson?
Yeah, but
Where the heck has he been?
he hasn't really gotten a lot of plays.
Man, that make
and I know like
the selection of players is very strange to me. I'll
you
never
got
understand that.
you got
It's like the
some
Jets
decisions.
rotating D linemen. No one makes any sense of it.
you got some decisions to make in the offseason, Saquon and Jones.
That's gonna be a fun one. That's gonna be fun.
That's the thing I don't get. It's like rebuild, but you got two guys. You're basically your team going on the free agent market.
So, speaking of
Right?
free
I mean,
agents and trades,
It's like why not? I don't know.
Speaking of free agents and trades, but before we go all into that, there's one game I want to go over because I think people, if they were watching Fox Sports, got to watch the end of one of the biggest meme games I've ever seen. Carolina and Atlanta, the battle for first place of the NFC South. Who knew we would say that in Week 8? I don't think anyone here would expect it. We jumped this. PJ Walker is the new Panthers starting quarterback. He actually looked good. He looked really good. 19 of 36. Yeah, it doesn't jump out to you. 317 passing yards. There you go. A touchdown and an interception that was not his fault. Dante Foreman went off for 26 for 118, 3 touchdowns. And then DJ Moore, who had probably the equivalent of the DeAndre Hopkins catch from a couple of years ago, in the back of the end zone with no time remaining, and they missed the extra point that could have won them the game. Game goes to overtime. Another Panthers missed field goal. They know how to choke away a game very well. Falcons best kicker, one of the best kickers in the league, in Younghoe Koo. Easy field goal. Game over. Marcus Mariota and the Atlanta Falcons lead the NFC South over Tampa, New Orleans, and Carolina. If Carolina won, they would have been I think it would have either been a 4-way tie or Carolina had it on winning percentage. So very interesting situation there. But we go from there to a very interesting dilemma, which was, I believe, was it yesterday, the trade deadline, or 2 days ago?
2 days ago.
2 days ago. Correction on that. For those who don't know, the NFL trade deadline usually is the equivalent of nothing happening at all, and no one really enjoys it. Well, the narrative kind of changed this year, as early in the day we got to see some big trades, including my big favorite trade of the day, which is going to impact the team the most. TJ Hawkinson traded to a division rival from Detroit to Minnesota in exchange for draft picks. I love it. Minnesota loses Irv Smith till January. Okay. They go out and make a move to to a position of need. Who would have thought? This is why some people can say that the Vikings firing everyone and getting the overhaul that they needed was the best thing they could have done. Look what they've been able to do. Yeah, they've traded back, and one of their trades looks really stupid from a couple months ago in the draft when they could have had Jameson Williams, but they decided to trade him for a second-round pick. Really smart there. But at the end of the day, the Vikings probably had one of the best trade deadlines. I would agree. If they give them a grade, I give them an A. I mean, they did everything. They needed a position. They had a position of need in tight end. You go out and get one, I think the second or third best tight end in the league in pures of raw talent, and you get him for another year on a cheap contract. I'll take that any day of the week. But now for Minnesota, that might limit Irv Smith's days in Minnesota. Maybe you see him traded at the draft this year. Who knows? But I feel like that's one of the biggest trades of the day. Like, Colin, the Giants made an interesting move with Kadarius Toney.
Well, we actually got into that a little bit last week. That actually happened as we were on our show. So, I talked about that last week, but the team I do want to focus on is I want to talk about the team that was probably the most active and probably the biggest in the headlines. Let's talk about the Chicago Bears. Ooh. Because the Bears ended up, actually before the deadline happened, they traded Robert Quinn to the Philadelphia Eagles for a 4th-round pick.
And then they traded Roquan.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Robert Quinn actually was a guy who I was surprised that got moved. I mean, he had 18 sacks. I believe it was just last year. So Philadelphia, the rich get richer. The Philadelphia defense has been dominant, and they're just going to keep on getting better. We'll talk about them with their Thursday night game with the Houston Texans later on. But Then they ended up trading Roquan Smith to the Baltimore Ravens. And kind of the thought process was that Chicago didn't want to pay Roquan Smith. I mean, I don't really know why. I think that he was a great player for that defense, but I guess Chicago just had their priorities elsewhere. Baltimore is going to be getting a great player on their defense there. Obviously, I actually just saw they lost Rashad Bateman for the year. Yes. So the offense is going to continue to be banged up, but, kind of a little bit more of a reliance on Lamar Jackson. Once again, I mean, that's usually how the Ravens operate. But I mean, the defense is going to get better. And I think that's a good trade for the Ravens. But what the Bears ended up doing is that they finally got help for Justin Fields. They ended up trading for Chase Claypool. And basically what they ended up doing here is they got Claypool for a second-round pick. And they also traded away Roquan Smith for a second-round pick. So it was essentially like you're swapping Roquan Smith for Chase Claypool. And that's kind of a controversial move because obviously I do feel that Smith is a better player than Claypool. But I think that the Bears desperately needed a player like Claypool. You can't, and truthfully, I've been impressed with what Justin Fields has done the past couple of weeks. He had that good win on Monday Night Football against the Patriots. That's probably as good as he's looked in his career. And, although they lost to the Cowboys, I mean, they lost 49-29. I think Fields still made a couple of good plays, I mean, you always see it with Justin Fields. I think that the talent is there. Some of the throws he was making too, changing to arm angles. I mean, that's the only things we see guys like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen do.
Zach Wilson from time to time.
Yeah. But the talent is there. It's just going to be getting the guys around them and, possibly seeing as Fields can progress in the NFL. And they have Matt Eberflus as head coach, the guy from a defensive background. They ended up getting rid of Matt Nagy, who came from an offensive background. So I think the bigger key is not going to be necessarily on the coaching. It's going to be the players that you put around him. And Claypool is obviously a very talented guy. Now, sure, he had his issues with the Steelers, kind of controversies in terms of, I believe it was the game against, was it the Vikings last year, where there was a situation where he didn't.
He did like a sell. Hold on,
So basically the situation, to break it down for everyone, there was 39 seconds left in a game against Minnesota. Steelers were down by either like 3 or 7. And Chase Claypool, nice 10-yard slant, easy, celebrates, doesn't spike the ball. They lose 10 seconds, burn a timeout eventually. Steelers lose that game. The controversy is there. I mean, is Claypool really worth the second-round pick?
Probably not.
Probably not, right? So I don't like that they overpaid for him. It's funny to see he didn't go to Green Bay because I know Green Bay offered the same. It was reportedly came out that Green Bay offered the same plus an extra like 7th round pick or something. Yeah. I mean, who knows what they could have done with the 7th round pick? Maybe drafted a stud. But at the end of the day, Chicago is confusing. Another one of those confusing teams. Maybe the entire NFC North, other than Minnesota, is like that this year because Detroit's selling pieces that they really didn't need to do. And then they did an ad to help out Jared Goff. Who knows who their quarterbacks can be next year. You go with Green Bay, who did nothing, and Chicago, who sold and then bought a receiver for a second-round pick. A swap of. By the way, the second-round pick they traded was their own pick. It was not the Steelers' pick. A little controversial for that is, the pick that got traded to the Steelers was the Bears pick, not the pick they got for Roquan Smith. So very interesting move there. But another trade, I believe there's one more trade we want to highlight. Bradley Chubb. I remember last week when we said he wasn't going to get moved if the Broncos win. I believe I said that. We both did. And he got traded. Yeah, the Broncos sold. He got a first-round pick for Bradley Chubb, it's a rental, or so we thought. Because he then today re-signed for 5 years, $119 million. Miami Dolphins know how to do business. They do not know what they're doing with cap space because now they have under $1 million to sign all their players. Good luck. But we get to talk about them their free agency months away. I love this move as a fan of the NFL. I hate that he went to the Dolphins. Why do the Dolphins and the Bills want to compete this badly? I don't know where the Dolphins are eventually going to get this money from because they're going to eventually. Then again, people can argue that NFL cap space is irrelevant, which it could be. You can argue. That's a fair argument. I mean, you see what the Saints did, negative $70 million in cap room a couple of years ago. When Drew Brees was still there, for reference, they had negative $79 million in cap space. They signed one free agent, and I think we're negative 65. That's how bad it was for them. But I feel like the Dolphins, they did what they needed to do. They added Jeff Wilson. I don't know why, because I feel like you needed someone better than Jeff Wilson. I feel like you see what the Bills did at the deadline? Added Nyheim Hines. I mean, they needed someone who can catch the ball out of the backfield, see how many drops Zach Moss has. So they traded Zach Moss to Indianapolis. The Bills did in exchange for Nyheim Hines, which I feel like is a very fair value move for them. But going back to Bradley Chubb, absolute havoc creator. He knows what he's done. He's so textbook. That's what everyone likes about him. The value that's there, how textbook he can be, especially on the edge. I do not want to face him. The Jets faced him the last week of the year. Who knows? Maybe we don't have to face him this year because they'd be resting players if the Dolphins make the playoffs. Who knows? But I feel like this deadline, I mean, I don't know. Like, do you think the Giants could have done? Do you think the Giants should have done more at this trade deadline, Colin?
It's always just, by the end of the season, depending on what the result's going to be, say if the Giants go into the playoffs, possibly go on a run and lose, it's always going to be that question. A lot of teams don't have big windows in the NFL. You think that a window could be open for a long time, but it's surely not. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Green Bay Packers both did not expect themselves to be 3-5 when the season started. And the New York Giants definitely did not expect themselves to be 6-2. But that's the thing with the NFL. If you're in the front office, you truly never know when a window is going to close. So, sure, if you're the Giants, you're 6-2 right now. It looks like an opportunity where you can pounce on that. But you may be banking that, we're going to have the future. But then again, you never truly know, what's going to happen in the future. You don't know what's going to happen with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley's contracts. So, it's really tough to say. But I think it really just comes down to, what's going to happen in the future. We'll definitely be talking about this for a while if the Giants, end up going on that run and then the Blues in the playoffs and the wide receiver position becomes a glaring weakness. But in general, I think we can't really say that right now. But before we finish off the trade deadline, I wanted to talk about one more trade which we didn't get into. Calvin Ridley getting traded into the Jacksonville Jaguars. And that was one of the kind of the more wild moves because Calvin Ridley has not been playing football for over a year. He was focused on his mental well-being and also got suspended due to gambling. So the Falcons traded him away for a conditional second, and I believe it was a conditional fifth.
I believe it was a fifth and a condition in
2024 conditional second.
I believe it. So the trade value was a 5th round pick and a conditional pick that starts as a 4th and could become a 2nd round pick in 2024. What Jacksonville? I don't know what to say. I'm going to dive in this quickly because we still have to preview our games for next week. But Jacksonville, why? I feel like, so first of all, Atlanta's going to want Jacksonville to re-sign him. I have no idea what he's going to do. There's too much risk that was involved with this trade that I don't think needed to be happening, especially from Jacksonville's perspective, where they want to contend. This is not their year. They overspent million free agents. Still not their year. They want to do more. This is not it. You see what Tennessee's doing? They're 5-2. They're legit. Jacksonville's nowhere close to that. You have Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, his O-line is going to kill him. I have to be straight up with them real quick. Like what they're doing is not what Jacksonville is doing. It should not be happening. They spent all these money on these free agents, overpaid Christian Kirk. How are they here? How? This is one of those teams that have no idea what they're doing. I feel like Trent Baalke is not the right GM for them. I think he should have gotten fired last year with all the situation with Meyer. But at the end of the day, Jacksonville going very risky, kind of like what Calvin Ridley did in a way with all the gambling stuff. So, Colin, you got any last words for the trade deadline?
Yeah, for Jacksonville, I think that's something we're going to need to talk about in the future. Trevor Lawrence has not looked great. I'm not sure really what we're going to talk about potentially if he could be a bust in the future. That's a conversation I thought I'd never have.
Yeah.
But, it's looking like that way for the Jaguars. It's been rough for them. But I guess before we finish off the trade deadline, Chris, I want to see if you have any extra thoughts on any of the things you saw. I heard you were talking about Miami when you first started.
Yeah, I was kind of adding on to what Robbie said. The amount of money that they're putting into Bradley Chubb and still have Pete, not worrying about cap space. I think
they're doing what the Rams did. They're doing
They
are
the
wannabe. They're the wannabe Rams.
But the Rams,
if you think about it,
also got a quarterback, right?
Well, not really. Not really, because I'm gonna go. I get to go. Yeah, you can believe that, but Matt Stafford is getting killed behind his line. I actually get to go with Matt Stafford in a second, but
last year.
Yeah, no, that's true. So they have Tua, but they're actually very similar.
Is their team good enough, you think?
No.
But the Rams, you could have made
the Rams. You can make that argument.
Yeah.
I do not like the Dolphins secondary at all.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Other than Xavier Howard, because of how injury prone everyone.
It's like that team had
not legit.
Had the core, and they added on to the core.
Well,
this team is kind of like
the Dolphins added the wrong
thing. It's a good team, but it's like
You Bradley Chubb, phenomenal. Christian Wilkins, underrated as hell. What else do they have? Not enough.
I think the Bills are the best team that.
They have this guy Phillips who's been underrated as well. But come on. They needed secondary help. I think they could have gotten secondary help. They didn't do it. Shocking.
As for the Jets and Giants, like I think less is more in a way.
The Jets, thank goodness they did not trade Elijah Moore. I think they did that. I get to tackle this. They did it right. I have not really been able to say that with Jets and trades recently. They have done this right. It did not let this go and turn into a Jamal Adams saga. Now, granted, this can turn into a Jamal Adams saga, and I think it will turn into a Jamal Adams saga because at the end of the day, Elijah Moore, very interesting character. He reminds me a lot of Jamal Adams. Very similar characters. Very cocky. Characters who think they can overachieve in the league. Elijah Moore overachieved last year. You have to admit that now. But at the end of the day, I think the Jets did it right. Did not trade him for table scraps. But I want to dive into, before we actually dive into the NBA real quick for a couple of minutes, I want to quickly dive into my game pick of the week. There's a lot of interesting games. I'm going to go with the game of real. Who thought Buccaneers Rams was going to be a prove yourself? Who would have thought? Jets Bills is kind of a prove yourself matchup for the Jets, which, by the way, I'm picking the Bills to win that game. Jets go to 5, slide to 5-4. That's very possible. But the Jets, Zach Wilson threw for 350 last week. Maybe they make a move, but I feel like the Bills should win that game on paper. But going back to the Rams and the Bucks, what the hell? Like, how are we here? I think the Rams line, I said it earlier with Stafford, they were killing him. They needed to address the line in the deadline. Didn't do anything. They needed to address running back at the deadline. Did nothing. They have Henderson, Akers, and I forgot the other one. Malcolm Brown, I think is the other one. What are they doing? Like, Tampa Bay, the same thing. I think Tampa Bay, yeah, they could have gone for like some outside. Maybe they could have gone for Bradley Chubb. They have cap space. Who knows? They did nothing as well. So I feel like whoever wins this game is, we're coming back. We're doing what we needed to do to save our season. But I don't know. My pick for this game, I want to pick the Rams. I'm picking the Rams again. I'm going with the Rams over the Bucks, 20-17. Rams find a way to actually do something. If you want to watch the game, it's at 4:25 on Sunday. Colin, you got a game of the week to pick for us.
At least looking at the slate right here, it doesn't really look like, as much of, primetime games or a lot of big games this week. If I just want to go completely random here, and I'll do it, I'll go Vikings Commanders, because the Washington Commanders have been on the rise. Ever since Carson Wentz went out, Taylor Heineke, sure, he's not necessarily the greatest quarterback, but he's done enough to win them the games. They won against the Colts. Sham Ellinger got his start. The game's going to be at Washington. And actually, the Washington has been in the news recently because it looks like Dan Snyder may finally sell the team. I actually heard rumors that Jeff Bezos could be in the mix. Jeff Bezos with Jay-Z.
I like this. Hold on.
This would be phenomenal, and this could change Washington's franchise for the better if Dan Snyder sells their team. They do not need to be in the media more. I'm not going to say sell the team. He can do whatever he wants, basically, unless like the government comes after him. But at the end of the day, who knows? Maybe Washington sells. I like the game pick of Washington, Minnesota. That's a very Kirk Cousins, Taylor Heineke. I don't know. That's a very fun matchup. I like that. Two underrated wide receivers in McLaurin and Jay Jettas. Who knows?
Kirk Cousins goes back to Washington for the first time.
Yes.
And also, but going back to Dan Snyder real quick, as a Giants fan, I do not want to see Dan Snyder sell that team. I think that it really is a really interesting situation. If Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Commanders, he could basically afford any player if he ever wanted to. It's really it's a weird
space,
there is, but sure, but say you see if you can go over, teams go over the salary cap all the time. Washington is not going to be a team that's going to be scared to do that. If you have Jeff Bezos as your owner, he's not going to be scared to throw out those paychecks. But yeah, I think this could be a trap game for the Vikings. The Vikings are 6-1 right now. I think they're bound to maybe have a loss coming up soon. Their one loss is to Philadelphia, although they have looked like a very good unit. I think this is a game where maybe Washington can catch them by surprise. I still think the Vikings win, but I'm going to say Washington makes it a close game. I think they really will. Chris, what's your game?
So for the sake of being different, I probably would Bills Jets looks interesting.
Ooh. Did not think a Giants fan would pick a Jets game, not gonna lie.
That's one to watch for sure. Bills Jets, because both teams still. The Jets. I think the Bills are winning, but it's gonna be in MetLife Stadium. The Jets want to stay in the mix. The Bills.
A phenomenal fan environment. I don't like that this game is home.
Another interesting game, and
Can I mention one thing real quick here? The Jets are undefeated on the road. I wanted this game to be in Buffalo this week. The Jets suck at home somehow,
Buffalo's
which is
tough.
it's usually the very much polar opposite. But the Jets won. I mean, the Jets won in Green Bay. Who knows where they can win at this point?
And I can't believe I had to say that, like Colts Patriots.
Real-
Both teams trying to stay in the mix.
I mean-
the Colts. I mean, if you're a Colts fan, you're staying with the team, so I salute you. My God.
I mean, like
But
Sam
the
Ellinger.
Patriots are not
Same
that-
draft class, by the way. Same draft class
Yeah.
with Sam Ellinger.
But the Patriots are not. I mean, they're not. I know they beat the Jets. They're not the most.
Jacoby Myers,
convincing team.
please. Jacoby Myers goes off in that game away, but that's my prediction for that game. I mean, I don't know, but like, I love those game picks though. Like, they're two underrated games. But I feel like you guys are gonna have a little fun here for a couple of minutes. We got the NBA to talk about real quick. We're gonna dive into that. A couple minutes in the NBA. Is there a team that you guys think are overachieving? That's overachieving. Chris, you get to go first. Who do you think is over or underachieving? Real quick.
I think there are a couple teams underachieving. for sure.
Underachieving. You could say a lot of teams, to be fair.
I mean, my Cavaliers are the team that I said was going to
they
win.
they
They
look
are,
good, dude.
yeah,
They look
yeah.
good. I got to see them. I saw one of their games recently. They look good.
Donovan
Darius
Mitchell,
Garland, Donovan Mitchell, they look
I don't
good.
think Garland's played.
I,
'cause I haven't
did
fantasy,
he
he
play in
hasn't
one
played.
game? Really?
I don't know. He only got me like 9 points.
Oh no,
in fantasy, he got hurt.
I thought I saw someone that looked like Darius Garland. I don't know, but Cleveland.
They beat the Celtics yesterday.
That was yesterday, right? Yeah, I watched that game. I thought I saw Darius Garland. I don't know why, but Donovan Mitchell, phenomenal talent. I feel like the Cavs
I think there's
are legit.
You know, there's a lot of
They're
obviously
legit.
There's a lot of bad stuff going around Nets and Lakers.
The
land.
Nets. Thank
just
you
fu-
for firing Steve Nash a couple days ago. Thank you. That's something they needed. They needed an overhaul change. Now they're hiring the guy from the Celtics who was in
There were rumors
controversy
apparently.
for more controversy. I kind of like it, but Colin, you got a team that's under or overachieving.
Well, I think I have to go with my San Antonio Spurs. As I've said before on the show, I am a San Antonio Spurs fan. You know, Robbie doesn't really have a team that he roots for. Chris is a Knicks fan, but I'm a San Antonio Spurs fan, although I am a Giants and a Yankees fan. So let's talk about them. So my San Antonio Spurs are 5-3 right now, 5th place in the Western Conference. And let me just say, I mean, the thought was that this team was going to be absolutely awful. Everyone said this is the worst team in basketball, but Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell, two guys I really want to highlight here. I know you're already laughing, but Devin Vassell is averaging 20 points a game.
How is Devin Vassell your second best player? Like
Good.
they're 5-3 with Devin Vassell. I mean, I like Devin Vassell.
I don't want to hear any Devin Vassell slander from you right now. Devin Vassell, guy out of Florida State, he's been improving as the years have gone on. And let me just talk about Keldon Johnson. That's the primary focus here. You know, Keldon Johnson averaging 24 points a game. And let me just say, I've watched this guy progress throughout his entire career. You know, back in his rookie season in 2020, he really didn't get a lot of minutes. He didn't really start getting minutes until that NBA bubble. But just his ability to develop a free-point shot. This is a guy who is now shooting 45% from free. And this is a guy who was really not able to hit a free-pointer at all when he first came into the league. He's got terrific, you know, drive into the paint, being able to hit a free-pointer. I think this is a guy who, if he keeps it up, I mean, we saw it with DeJounte Murray last year. Could Keldon Johnson possibly find himself to be an all-star? I think that we're really looking at it. And I mean, I've been watching this guy a lot throughout the years. I really like what I'm seeing there. But yeah, in general, I like what I'm seeing out of San Antonio. They actually had a 43-point loss to the Toronto Raptors last night because Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell both are not playing. But, you know, it's not a lot of expectations with this team. And I think that, you know, they're a young team which is going to catch teams off guard a lot of nights. They actually beat Minnesota twice so far. But let's also talk about the Utah Jazz. I mean, that is even more surprising. The Utah Jazz are 6-3. They have the 5th best record in the NBA. This is a team, once again, much like the Spurs, that everyone counted out. Now, granted, I don't know how sustainable it is. I'm not sure if Utah is, you know,
sustainable in that league.
you never know. But
never know.
I mean, the Spurs and the Jazz.
They haven't scored
They-
less than 100 points.
They
They're gonna win 2 of their next.
they
3
beat
games.
they beat Memphis
Two
twice,
against the Lakers.
and then they lost to Luka. They beat Houston, and then they lost to Houston, which is what? I mean, I believe they've gotten some good wins. I mean, it's the battle of, I feel like tomorrow when they play the Lakers, I feel like it's gonna become polar opposite of what they really should be doing. Because Utah should be bad, the Lakers should not be as bad. So that's a fun matchup to talk about. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel like I want Utah to win. Does everyone agree here that everyone would want Utah to win that game? That would talk about underachieving with the Lakers. Wow, what are they doing?
They won last night.
What cap? That is the reason you should have cap space, and that's why they should not have traded for Russell Westbrook. They're not playing him enough.
Well, Actually, the Lakers have now have Russell Westbrook coming off the bench, and his play's actually been better coming off the bench. His stats have actually increased. Russell, as they're calling him now, Russell Benchbrook, he's actually been pretty good, so far coming in that role. But the big part of this Lakers team is that they didn't have 3-point shooting. Shout out to Matt Ryan. He had a big buzzer beater last night. Former guy who went to Iona Prep, actually. Yes. I think that's worth mentioning. But Matt Ryan is really the only 3-point shooter on that team outside of Austin Reeves. I mean, Lonnie Walker, a guy from San Antonio, he's really stepped up his play for that Lakers team. He had 28 points last night. But yeah, the Lakers, I mean, they have some problems. They have to get that fixed, but they're not alone. The Golden State Warriors are also 3-5. I expect they'll bounce back, but rough sledding for them so far. The Los Angeles Clippers, Kawhi Leonard has not really played a lot. It's still such a weird situation. I mean, this is a guy who is only averaging 12 a game. I think he's missed the past 5 or so games. I mean,
he's not played for me in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be tough for you, Chris. But yeah. I mean, the Brooklyn Nets, though, that's another team. I mean, just what a mess that team is. I mean, they just, everything going on with Kyrie Irving, we don't need to get into that. But I mean, possibly hiring Ime Udoka, who with all the controversy surrounding that, 2-6 start. I mean, what can we really make of it that so many of these star-powered teams have just not been good? I mean, the Nets have not been good. The Lakers have not been great. The Clippers have not been impressive. The Warriors haven't been impressive either. I mean, what do we make of that?
Well, and I don't know if this is the reason, right? But you were mentioning it the other day, Colin. I think maybe this is a shift in the NBA stars.
Yeah,
stardom.
That's a fair point. Maybe shifting from like LeBron and KD,
these deeper teams. Because I see, I mean, you look at these top teams; they're all deep rosters. Some of them obviously overachieving.
Yes,
I mean, there are teams in the
Utah
middle there that are maybe have 500 records that are going to be a lot better. But I mean, I see. I mean, the Cavaliers and Bucks are looking incredible. The Raptors look really good. I mean, and they're all deep rosters.
It's very strange to see.
Both teams, the Nets and Lakers, really relying on stars who are older, getting older, and I think that could be something.
Well, I think we can transition from the NBA real quick to our new segment that we developed last week. Shout out to everyone. We get to do a couple shout outs as well. Probably one of our new favorite segments. So we questions for the radio show, and you guys get to dive into this. We're gonna do the first one from Arit Pictures. Thoughts on Game 4 of the World Series, and is the no-hitter, could it change the momentum the way the Yankees did after they got no-hit by Houston?
I
think it will.
I mean, yeah,
they win the next 2 games.
My prediction, because I said they're going to win the next 2 games. I mean, I think that could be part of it. I mean, Christian Javier looks really good, man. He looks. I mean,
I feel like it's going to be the same thing that the Yankees did.
I think he needs his respect. I mean, the Yankees, though. I mean,
they came back well, didn't they? They came back
after
well
that. When they got no hit by the Astros, yeah. I mean, they continued that stretch until the All-Star break. Then they struggled. It was after the All-Star break they really started to struggle. Yeah, I thought it was a really obviously very well pitched game. I think it's something Houston does. They have a set bullpen. They have a set plan.
Ryan Presley is fantastic.
You know what? I mean, I don't know if it's I think he's the best closer in baseball.
Oh, over Diaz?
Because the way I look at it is how
over Diaz.
He is.
Diaz is consistent. He just didn't get out of the first round. I mean, he had that 4-run game against San Diego.
No, I'm saying, yeah, this season beat Diaz.
Yeah, no.
I think the best closer overall past couple of years.
Oh, okay. That's a very fair statement now, actually. I mean, Diaz's inconsistency. I can agree with that.
I'm not comparing him to Mariano Rivera.
Good.
But he's been a consistent closer for Houston for years. Yeah. He's not the best. He'll consistently have a 2.30, 2.40 ERA, I think.
I think he was in the 2. I think his highest career ERA was 2.9.
That's what he needs. You don't need that one closer who's gonna have a 1 ERA and then be 5 ERAs the next
Clay Holmes.
Clay Holmes, kind of, but that's different. I mean, I'm talking like kind of Diaz, like Liam Hendricks, consistent 2 ERA guy, gonna consistently get saves and curveball first. It's a different approach to most closers. Guys are going with 100 miles an hour nowadays. He's a really good closer, man.
I like him a lot. And Colin, you got to take on this?
I mean, obviously for any team, when you get no hit, I mean, it's tough to, deal with, especially in the World Series. It's only the second time it ever happened. And people, were kind of downplaying it since it's a combined no hitter. I feel that's kind of silly. I think that was obviously a very impressive game by the Houston Astros, and they should be, applauded for it. It could possibly change the momentum in the Astros' favor for sure. I mean, whenever no-hit a team, especially the psychological kind of impact of that. I mean, I still think the Phillies will win, But I wouldn't be surprised if Houston wins the next 2 games. Don't get me wrong. They're a phenomenal baseball team. And I think they proved it once again there with that pitching performance. And I mean, every single game, this Astros offense has showed up besides that game 3 where Philly, it was the first World Series game in Philadelphia in 13 years. I think you kind of, expected a high atmosphere situation, but especially going back into Houston too. I mean, this Astros team is going to be ready. Do not get me wrong. I mean, the Phillies are really going to need to channel what those Nationals and Braves teams did before them. You really have to, just be an underdog, feed into what you've been doing the whole entire year and just ride it out. It's going to be fascinating for sure. But yeah, that no-hitter, I mean, if the Astros go on to win the series, that's going to be the key moment that everyone is going to say that they won them that series.
So the other question we got, we're going to dive into this really quickly. It's from Kurt Gossner. Kurt, shout out, man. Should the Jets in the upcoming draft spend the premium pick on a safety or a linebacker? Where is the hell yes option? Because at the end of the day, I don't feel like I think the Jets should re-sign Quincy Williams, and I feel like with the linebackers available, I got a couple of them on here. My favorite out of them, I mean, they have a Henry TuaTua from Alabama, hard-hitting linebacker, terrible in coverage. Trenton Simpson of Clemson, good in coverage, not very good at tackling someone, kind of like a C.J. Henderson in a way. And then we have Noah Sewell, Penei Sewell's brother, who is a little more balanced but very slow. So I feel, and then you compare him to the safeties. I love Jordan Battle at Alabama. I love his hard hitting ability. He reminds me a lot of Jamal Adams, but with the different personality. I mean, he's ranked the lowest of the 3 I got on my list. I got Antonio Johnson of Texas A&M and Brandon Joseph of Notre Dame. So I feel like depending where the Jets have what they really value is where they're at in the draft. Say they're at 15. I feel like 5 of those 6 names, I think at least 5. I think the only one that would not be there would be Antonio Johnson. You have all those guys there. If you want to trade down, go right ahead. I have no problem unless there's a guy that the number 1 guy on your board is there and you don't pick him. I don't want to turn him into the Minnesota Vikings, even though they're successful. So I mean, that's another way to look at it. But like, you guys got a quick take on this?
I mean, sure, why not? I mean, if you're gonna add more pieces and
I mean, they need
defense,
to.
yeah,
They need
I
to.
think you gotta look into that in the draft, as well as other pieces as well.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you can possibly fill holes on your roster, I think you have to take advantage of that. The NFL draft in general, it's always kind of a situation where you obviously build the depth of your team, possibly get young guys to develop there. I mean, the Jets still have C.J. Mosley at middle linebacker. I'm not sure.
Overpaid as all hell.
Yeah,
Overpaid as all hell.
but eventually he's going to be gone. So I think you do have to look into possibly the future on that defense. But also, a story you brought up before, Joe Flacco getting demoted, which I think is very sad.
Yeah.
Mike White now becoming the second string quarterback, but that's
Good.
besides the point.
Good.
He was top 5 in passing yards.
I'd rather a QB that can move, not gonna lie. Mike White.
Who's got more dog? Mike White or Joe Flacco?
That's a tough one.
That's a tough one. I think it's a very
That's a
debatable
tough
question. I
question.
feel like that we could
Tough
say
I mean, we're talking about
to
a
another
Super Bowl
time.
quarterback.
Another Super Bowl
We're
winning
talking about
quarterback.
Mike
I mean,
He won a game.
he won a game. Both
Yeah,
one game, but and then the other
Flacco
start
won a lot of
but
games.
the other start he had, after that second start, he's 1-1 as a starter, and then he got COVID. You ever really got to see how good Mike White could really be? But besides the point, we're going to conclude this show off as per usual with our Thursday Night Football picks. I think everyone watching this thinks this should be pretty straightforward. Philadelphia 7-0, Houston 1-5
And that's the show, ladies
Two-
and gentlemen.
But I mean, this pick should be pretty straightforward. I'm
listening.
gonna start us off with this pick. Who do we got tonight? Somehow, people only 88% of the poll voted for Philadelphia. I don't know how it's only 88%, but I'm gonna go with the Eagles. I love Jalen Hurts. I mean, the talent he has. I remember when people talk crap about him for getting picked when they had Carson Wentz. Maybe Philadelphia should be more thankful for what Jalen Hurts. If they played on Thanksgiving, maybe that's something they say they'd be thankful for since Thanksgiving is coming up in a couple of weeks. But I love Philadelphia adds to their defense. Houston does nothing. Houston lost to Malik Willis. Well done. They're going to lose. Philadelphia blows out Houston 38-10. They get the job done, go to 8-0, and solidify themselves. Not really as one of the top 2 teams in the league at 8-0. And the first undefeated team for more than seven games since the Pittsburgh Steelers, not that long ago. Colin, who do you got tonight?
Genuine question. Are fans of the teams going to be watching the game? I mean, the World Series is on. Both of these
I
two
don't
teams
know.
are on right
That's
now. It's
actually
Philadelphia and
That
Houston.
is
I mean,
true.
this is, because originally what was going to happen is this would be on the off day of the World
Yes,
Series. But now
yes.
with the rain out, this game's going to be going on. So you might not even see fans of the team watching this. And they may have a good reason because this should not be a competitive football game. The Eagles have been playing like the best team in the league. Texans have been debatably the worst team in the league. So the Eagles obviously will win in a pretty lopsided game. I think most of the fans' attention for these two teams is going to be turned over to the World Series. I mean, granted, there are Eagles and Astros fans, or Eagles and Texans fans who are also fans of the baseball teams. But yeah, I mean, this should be pretty obvious. Eagles winning the laugher.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're a Houston fan. What do you do? You go to the game, Texans game, or go to the Astros stadium and watch the game on the TV?
I think to be
Watch
honest,
party.
as like knowing people who are from Houston, I feel like they would all go to Minute Maid and watch the
just
Houston
watch the
game.
game over watching a live football.
Little quick detail I want to throw in there. Jalen Hurts is actually a Houston Astro fan. So that's
Oh,
kind of
that's-
a really weird kind of, dynamic there. But yeah, Philly and Houston really in the news a lot here. So, but Eagles should win that. We'll see what happens in the World Series, though.
All right, I'm gonna pick. So we're gonna do our picks.
I mean, you're the only one left to
Okay.
pick. You're the only one left to pick.
Because I'm going with the Texans.
Come on.
That's right, I'm gonna go with the Texans.
Are you
Are you never gonna say anything different?
I mean,
Oh, Davis Mills is not bad, but
no,
really,
I think they're gonna win, man. I think
they only have two
the
good
Texans,
players.
I
Damian
think-
Pierce.
I think Giants fans are gonna need to have a real scouting report of the Texans here. It's gonna be a real.
I mean, I
I'm gonna go with
like
the
it.
Texans,
Well, I mean that's a phenomenal.
The Jets.
I mean, who knows? Maybe Damian.
Of course.
Oh, you are picking the Eagles. I was making sure. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we got for today. Thank you guys for watching. If you're tuning into this live, thank you for watching. If you're tuning into this later on, thank you for watching as well. Make sure you tune in every week 5 to 6, and make sure to follow our Instagram at Into the Stands, because we post polls, ask you guys questions, and maybe you guys can get a shout out in a future episode. But unfortunately, for Colin, Chris, and myself, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next week.